The chamber was vast, its walls carved from living stone and lit by the cold glow of alien suns. 1,000 voices had roared there only moments ago, voices of empires, predators, conquerors. Now, silence. At the center stood a single human, their breath steady, their gaze unflinching. Before them, the Council of Species had demanded surrender, demanded compromise, demanded humanity kneel before murderers. Every other world had bent. Every other civilization had bargained for survival. But humanity did not. The words spoken were not shouted. They were quiet, resolute, yet they echoed louder than any war drum. Words that froze the predators of the galaxy in their tracks. And in that silence, a question lingered like a blade hanging above the stars. What happens to a galaxy when humanity refuses to kneel? On Earth, the stars had always been symbols of dreams, of longing, of stories whispered around campfires. To most, they were distant points of light. But for Commander Elias Cade, they were maps. Every constellation was a promise. Every dark gap between them a challenge waiting to be met. Cade was not a man who sought glory. He had grown up on the rugged coastlines of Newfoundland, where storms battered the shores and survival meant grit, not pride. His father was a fisherman, his mother a teacher, and between them they taught him the two truths that would carry him farther than either could imagine. Fight for what you love, and never trade honor for comfort. By the time Elias earned his commission in the Interstellar Diplomatic Corps, humanity had carved a fragile place among the stars. Not through firepower alone, though human warships were feared, but through a stubborn, almost irritating insistence on fairness. While other species bent laws to suit their power, humanity wrote treaties in plain words. While alien empires hoarded resources, humanity shared. It made them allies in unexpected corners of the galaxy, but also enemies who saw such honesty as weakness. Cade had felt those enemies lurking long before he stood in the council chamber. He had seen them on colony outposts, where trade agreements mysteriously collapsed and food shipments vanished into pirate hands. He had seen them in the whispered warnings from minor species, farmers, healers, wanderers, who looked at humans with wide, frightened eyes and begged them not to resist the greater powers. And now, he stood at the edge of something far greater. The Galactic Council, an ancient forum where disputes between civilizations were supposedly settled, had summoned him as humanity's representative. Officially, the agenda was a peace accord between three great powers who had long warred among themselves. Unofficially, it was something far darker. Rumors swirled like shadows through the halls. Whole planets wiped clean of life. Species that resisted and simply disappeared. Words like necessary sacrifices and acceptable losses floated behind closed doors. And one phrase kept surfacing like an oil slick on water. Bargains must be made. For days before the meeting, Elias walked the station's corridors. He watched the alien envoys striding past with their jeweled robes and predatory smiles. He listened to their laughter, sharp and cold, echoing in languages that barely translated. And each time he caught his reflection in the glass of a viewport, he saw something that set him apart. He was human. Not the tallest, not the strongest, not the most advanced. Yet he carried in his chest something none of them could quite define, a refusal to bow. In the quiet hours, he thought of Earth, of his father's calloused hands pulling nets heavy with fish, of his mother's voice reciting poetry over the sound of rain, of oceans that could drown a man in seconds, and mountains that broke storms across their backs. The galaxy saw humans as fragile, but Elias knew the truth. Humanity was forged in trial. The night before the council convened, a message reached him. Encoded, hidden, passed through channels too dangerous to trace. It came from a small farming world on the galactic fringe, one of humanity's earliest allies. Its words were desperate, fragmented, but clear enough. They will force you to bargain with murderers. If you yield, all is lost. If you stand, we may yet have hope. Cade slept little that night. He watched the stars through his cabin window, those same stars he had once mapped as a boy. And he felt the weight of millions of voices pressing down on him, not just human voices, but those of every silenced world, every species that had been told it was too small to matter. When the summons finally came, he dressed in plain black. No armor, no medals, just the uniform of a man who carried his people's defiance in his bones. As he walked into the chamber, the roar of alien voices washed over him like a storm. The air reeked of incense and ozone, of power paraded as ritual. Above him, the vaulted ceiling shimmered with holograms of dying stars and conquered worlds. Somewhere in that crowd, murderers smiled behind diplomatic masks. And though Elias Cade did not yet know the words he would speak, he knew one thing with unshakable certainty. He would not bargain. Not with them. Not ever. The declaration had been simple, but its weight shook the stars. Humanity does not bargain with murderers. It echoed from the council chambers across every channel, through every fleet, into the homes of countless species, and the galaxy, for once, listened. The response was immediate. Sanctions, blockades, warnings of annihilation. The council would not allow a primitive world to humiliate them before the eyes of lesser races. Humanity had to be broken, publicly, irreversibly. But in the silence that followed the declaration, humanity was already moving. They came at Ganymede first. A fleet of 30 warships dropped from Slipstream, shields glimmering with arrogance. The moon's research stations were lightly defended, or so they believed. Hidden beneath ice crusts, human torpedo silos lay waiting, disguised as geothermal vents. When the alien fleet entered orbit, the ice cracked. Dozens of tungsten-tipped projectiles launched upward with silent fury. The first cruisers vanished in bursts of white fire, their shields shredded by kinetic energy they had never trained against. Within minutes, half the invasion force was reduced to drifting wreckage. The survivors scattered, retreating in disbelief. News spread faster than the Council's censors could silence it. Humanity had drawn blood. Admiral Elias Ward watched the data feeds from the command deck of the Resolute. His dark eyes tracked every vector, every intercepted transmission. "They'll come harder now," said Commander Ruiz beside him. "They'll send fleets we can't match." Ward's voice was calm. "Then we won't match them. We'll outthink them." For weeks, humanity became phantoms. Colonists at Ceres rigged asteroid mines to detonate into storms of molten rock. At Titan, disguised signal beacons lured Council ships into Saturn's rings, where hidden charges turned ancient ice into a weaponized ocean. Every battle was asymmetric. Every victory left humanity more feared than pitied, but each strike carried cost. Civilians fled burning colonies. Refugees filled the skies in endless flotillas. And still, humanity refused. The Council's patience snapped. Hundreds of ships gathered, larger than any force seen in Sol. They would crush Mars, the industrial heart of humanity, before pressing to Earth. Ward convened his war council. Engineers, soldiers, and even miners stood crowded in the underground chambers of Valles Marineris. "They believe Mars will fall in days," Ward said, his voice low but steady. "They are wrong. Mars will be entire cities tunneled deeper into the red soil, repurposed into bunkers and launch bays. Civilian freighters were armored with scrap and refitted into kamikaze drones. Thousands of tungsten rods, ash arrows, were buried beneath the crust, connected to electromagnetic rails. Mars would not defend itself. Mars would strike back. The first wave descended like a storm. Alien dreadnoughts fired plasma lances that boiled the atmosphere. Orbital stations fell in burning arcs. Ward stood aboard the Resolute, orbiting above, and waited. "Release the ash arrows," he ordered. From beneath the Martian surface, steel rain erupted. Tungsten spears, accelerated to hypersonic velocity, punched through alien carriers. Shields collapsed under kinetic wrath. Hulls ruptured. Engines screamed before silence claimed them. Entire formations broke. But more fleets pressed forward. Mars bled. Humanity bled. Yet the world hell on Earth, billions watched the transmissions. Families huddled in shelters as skies filled with military craft. Children asked why the stars themselves seemed at war. And still, there was hope. Every victory, no matter how small, was replayed across secret channels. An asteroid strike here, a destroyed dreadnought there. Farmers, miners, students, ordinary humans saw that their defiance mattered. They whispered it like a prayer, "We do not bargain." Even species under the Council's yoke began to notice. Rumors spread. If humans could resist, perhaps others could too. Weeks dragged into months. The Council grew desperate. "They are not strong," one elder spat in the chamber. "They are clever. Treacherous. They use desperation as a weapon." Another hissed, "And it works." "Our fleets suffer losses that cannot be hidden. Entire clans whisper that the humans cannot be defeated." A silence followed. Fear. Not of humans as they were, but of what they represented. For if a young, fragile species could defy the Council, then every oppressed world might remember how to stand. The Council resolved on one course: annihilation. They would not merely defeat Earth, they would erase it. Burn oceans, crack continents, silence humanity forever. Hundreds of fleets converged on Sol, a storm of steel and fire blotting out the stars. Ward watched from the Resolute as sensor data filled the holoscreens. His officers paled. Even his seasoned veterans fell silent. It was more power than humanity had ever faced, more ships than Sol had ever seen. "Admiral," Ruiz's voice faltered, "we can't hold against that." Ward's eyes were steady. "We don't hold. We make them." Question orders spread through the Martian defense net. Fleets maneuvered. Civilians prepared to fight with whatever they had left. The Council advanced, believing this would be the final battle. But humanity was ready with one last plan. One last strike that would echo across the galaxy. The stars themselves seemed to dim as the Council armadas closed in. And humanity whispered into the silence, "Come and see." The sky above Mars burned. The Council armada had arrived in full, a tide of warships blotting out the stars, their engines igniting the void with cruel light. Never had Sol faced such fury. Never had a single world stood against such impossible odds. From the command deck of the Resolute, Admiral Ward stared into the storm. His officers whispered numbers, fleet counts, weapon yields, probability of survival. Each calculation ended the same: extinction. And still, he stood tall. "Transmit to all stations," he ordered, his voice carrying like steel. "Final directive: hold the line. Show them why humanity endures. Across Mars, across Earth, across every outpost still breathing," his words spread. "Hold the line." Alien dreadnoughts unleashed barrages that ripped apart Martian orbitals, turning defenses into molten fragments. Shield grids collapsed under plasma fire. Human destroyers detonated in brilliant blossoms, their crews burning with them. But for every loss, the humans struck back. From hidden silos beneath Olympus Mons, ash arrows launched, streaking upward with hypersonic fury. Tungsten rods pierced the void, tearing through Council carriers with the wrath of falling stars. Entire formations faltered, yet the armada pressed on. more ships than humanity could count, more fire than any defense could withstand. Ward's jaw clenched. "Phase 2, he commanded. From the Martian surface, the ground itself began to rise. Buried deep within the soil were the last secrets of Earth's defense engineers. Colossal electromagnetic rails, hidden for years, never tested at this scale. One by one, they powered to life, feeding on the planet's very core. Then they fired. Not at ships, not at the fleets above, but into the void, into the asteroid belt beyond. Minutes later, the Council realized too late what had happened. A storm of redirected asteroids, each laced with explosives, each guided by swarms of drones, came screaming into the battle zone. The void turned into chaos. Council ships scattered, shields flaring against impacts they were never built to endure. Cruisers shattered under mountains of rock. Battleships were driven into collision with one another, breaking formation in catastrophic fire. The battlefield was no longer theirs. It was humanity's. Still, the Council refused to retreat. From the flagship Imperium's Wrath, the alien High Marshal broadcast his decree: burn the world. Let the galaxy see their ashes scatter dozens of super dreadnoughts aligned in unison, their weapons charging for a single purpose: planetary annihilation. Mars shuddered beneath the targeting beams. Ward's crew went silent. Civilians in bunkers held hands, whispering prayers. Families on Earth stared at trembling holoscreens. Humanity stood on the knife's edge. Ward exhaled slowly. His final card remained. "Activate Solnet," he ordered. Technicians paled. "Admiral, that will drain the entire grid. Earth's power, Luna's reserves, every relay." Ward's voice cut them off. "Do it." Across the system, hidden stations came alive. Satellites powered by reactors no one knew existed unfolded massive arrays. Lunar facilities funneled power into beams invisible to the eye. Earth itself went dark as entire continents surrendered their energy. The streams converged into a single weapon: the Solnet. A lattice of electromagnetic fury locked across Mars' orbit, a cage of human design. "Now," Ward whispered. The net contracted. Energy tore through the armada. Ships caught within the lattice convulsed as systems overloaded, shields shattered, reactors imploded. The void became a graveyard, vessels dying in silence one after another. Billions across Earth and Mars watched as the impossible happened. Fleets that had ruled the galaxy crumbled in minutes under human defiance. The Imperium's Wrath still burned bright, massive beyond comprehension, its hull layered with shielding centuries in the making. It pushed forward, undeterred, its annihilation cannons aimed at Mars. Ward's officers turned to him, despair in their eyes. "We can't stop that," Ruiz whispered. "Not even the net will break it." Ward's gaze hardened. "Then we break it another way." He opened a secure channel. "To all remaining vessels, ramming protocol." Silence answered. Then, one by one, voices confirmed. Civilian freighters, gunships with no ammunition left, mining rigs turned into war hulks, every last ship capable of thrust. They turned as one toward the Imperium's Wrath. The charge was slow, desperate, inevitable. Ships battered and burning hurled themselves forward. Crews who knew they would not return pressed engines to maximum. Families watching from Earth held their breath as their sons and daughters became meteors in human flesh. The first ram struck. Shields flared, cracking. The second followed. Then the third. Dozens of human vessels crashed into the alien Titan, breaking through armor, igniting fuel, detonating cores. Ward stood unmoving as his own flagship aligned for the final collision. "Admiral," Ruiz choked. Ward placed a hand on his shoulder. "Tell them we didn't bow. Tell them we stood." The Resolute surged forward. Impact. A blinding explosion consumed the void. Silence followed. When the light cleared, the Imperium's wrath was gone, broken into a drifting carcass, split apart by the sacrifice of thousands. Mars still burned, but it lived. Earth still trembled, but it endured. Humanity had not bargained. Humanity had not broken. And across the galaxy, from oppressed colonies to hidden outposts, one truth spread faster than fear itself. If humanity could stand against the Council, then perhaps anyone could. The smoke of war still clung to the galaxy. The wreckage of fleets drifted like tombstones across the void, silent testaments to arrogance and defiance. Entire empires had once thought themselves unshakable, rulers of the stars. And yet, in the council chamber where the galaxy's fate had been decided, silence reigned. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of realization. Humanity had not bargained. Humanity had not begged. Humanity had stood alone before the murderers of worlds and refused. The aftermath was more than political. It was cultural. Across alien societies, whispers spread faster than light. They spoke of a species that would rather be annihilated than dishonored, who would fight not only for themselves, but for every silenced world, every forgotten people crushed beneath tyrants. Ships that once sailed under imperial banners drifted into human space, not as enemies but as defectors seeking something they had never known before. A chance at justice. On Earth, the people did not celebrate in wild revelry. Their victory was not one of conquest, but of endurance. Candles burned in windows. Names of the lost were read aloud in city squares. Humanity remembered its dead, not as numbers, but as fathers, mothers, daughters, and sons. And the galaxy watched. For the first time, the predators of the stars saw a species that mourned even as it fought. They saw strength not in cruelty, but in compassion, not in domination, but in defiance. The council itself fractured. Worlds that had hidden behind neutrality now spoke with trembling voices, declaring independence, declaring unity with the humans. Others, once loyal to their empires, quietly dismantled their fleets rather than test Earth's resolve again. Because it was no longer just about warships or armies. It was about the story of a people who stood before the galaxy's darkness and refused to kneel. Generations from now, children on alien worlds would sit by fires or beneath glowing sky domes, listening to tales of the day humanity spoke and the galaxy fell silent. They would hear not of weapons or victories, but of courage, of voices steady in the face of annihilation. And in that story, they would find hope. Admiral Hayes stood once more in the chamber where it had all begun. The stone walls still bore the marks of that day, the faint echo of the words spoken, the silence that had followed. Around her, humans and aliens alike stood as equals, preparing not for surrender, but for rebuilding. Her gaze lingered on the empty thrones of those who had once ruled through fear. Now they were nothing but shadows, reminders of what had fallen. She spoke softly, yet her words carried through the chamber like a tide. They thought silence would break us. Instead, silence is where we became unbreakable, and so the galaxy began anew. It would not be easy. Scars remained. The weight of loss could not be erased with victory. But in the ashes of tyranny, something stronger than empires had risen. A promise. That humanity, flawed and fragile though it was, would never again allow murderers to dictate the fate of the innocent. And for the first time in countless ages, the galaxy believed that promise. Because it had seen what happens when humanity stands, and it had fallen silent.